Thank you for choosing to watch this video. If you enjoy it, please drop it a like and subscribe to my channel. Today I'm tying a clan chief variant, the change being swapping the body material for Semperfli's new pearl chenille in black. Start off by setting your hook in a vise, catching on your thread and trimming off the waist. As this fly is a silver tag, I'll tie in the tag at the start of the body to minimise building bulk as I tie the fly. So catching a flat silver tinsel in as we form the underbody. Then a few turns of tinsel for the tag, wrapping back over itself. And catching it in where we'll tie in the tail. Try and catch it in as neatly as possible to avoid any lumps and bumps in the underbody, and catch in the waist for the full length of the body. Once you've tidied up the waist tag of tinsel, the next step is to start tying in the tail. On this fly, this comprises two colours of floss, red over yellow. For this fly I'm using Semperfli's Fluoro Brite, which has been brushed out a bit before I tie them in. Catching in the yellow first at the head of the fly and tying down over the length of the body. You don't need to worry too much about covering up all the floss at this point, because we'll be wrapping the thread up and down the body a few times before we form the body. Trim off the waist end as neat as possible. We can tidy it up at the end. Quickly take the thread back up to the head of the fly. This helps if I can keep the tail aligned and sitting above the first part. Catching on the red Fluoro Brite in the same way. Take care to make sure it sits directly on top of the yellow floss, and tie it down to the same point. The tying thread I'm using is Semperfli's Nano silk in 18 knot, which hardly builds up any bulk as you're winding thread on, which means I don't have to be too careful about how many times I run the thread up and down the body. Trim off the waist of the red floss, and then catch in your silver wire rib, trying to keep it on the underside of the hook. Catch it in down over the body, taking a little bit of time to cover up as much of the floss as we can just now. And you can catch it into the same position as we've tied the tails in. Before we wind the body on, catch in the body material, tidy up the body of the fly and the head, make sure we're happy with the underbody. Again, it's not too important as we're using a pearl chenille, that'll cover a multitude of sins. When you catch in the pearl chenille, you want to strip away a few of the chenille fibres to expose some of the core. This will minimise the bulk and avoid an unsightly bump at the tail of the fly. Catch it in and then take the thread up towards the head of the fly where we want the body to stop. Wrap your chenille, trying to push some of the fibres back as you go to not trap us too many. You'll notice I've used quite a short length of chenille. This is to try and avoid wasting any. Normally I'd like to use something a bit longer, it makes it easier to tie. But with a bit of use of hackle pliers, this should do just fine. As you're forming the body, keep in mind that we need to leave space for 2 body hackles and the hen hackle at the head. Catch in with a couple of turns of thread, lock in a turn in front, and trim away the waist. I'm pushing the scissors against the tensioned waist tag as chenille cuts it nice and neat. Now we need a few more wraps to tidy up the head of the fly and make sure we've tied in the chenille nice and securely. Ready to catch in the body hackles. This fly has 2 body hackles wound together, one red and one black. The slight jump in the video there is because I butchered the first attempt. This is actually the second attempt at tying in the hackles. So I've tied this with the black hackle on top or in front of the red hackle. You can achieve a slightly different look by winding them the other way around. Once you've prepared your hackle by exposing some of the stock, catch in with a few turns. Going forward, fold the waist tips back and catch in and wind over back to the tie-in point. This also helps tidy up the front of the fly ready for the finishing off. Break away the hackle stalks when you've got them tied in properly. If it's too short you might need to use your pliers to catch it. Under a little tension, line up the hackles so they wind neatly together. Take your time and don't pull too tightly or you'll lose your grip like I did. But no problem, just realign them, catch them again and wind the hackles. So one full turn at the head of the fly and then palmer down the body. Looks like I'm being particularly ham-fisted today. Don't panic, just unwind the hackles, realign, catch them with the hackle pliers, and we can go again. So again, one turn of hackle at the head of the fly, and then palmer in open turns down the body. So we don't lose the hackles again. We can catch it in with the rib at the tail. Just rip the fly in open turns. If we keep the angle of the wire consistent, it should keep a nice even rib. Sometimes the chenille wind turns can get in the way a bit, but don't need to worry too much about that. Catch in the rib at the head of the fly and throw in a couple of turns of thread to make sure it's securely caught in, trying not to catch too many of the hackle barbs. Once the ribs turn it tied in, break away the waist hackle tips. Then we helicopter off the waist wire. This gives a nice even break without leaving any sharp points usually. Now tidy up the head of the fly. Make sure we've got space to catch in the hen hackle. So this fly uses a black hen hackle at the head of the fly tied long. Pull off the waist fluff at the bottom of the feather and catch it in by the tip. With a few turns of thread going forward, and then fold the tip back and tie it in securely. You can then pull away the waist tip and then we're ready to wind the hackle. So fold the barbules back as you wind it to try and keep them all pointing backwards on the fly. It's not too critical as we can tidy it up after we've got the hackle in, but if we can guide the hackles back, it does make life easier. The number of turns of hackle you need depends on the feather and the end effect you want on the fly. Usually somewhere between 2 and 4 turns does the trick. Once you're happy catching the hackle with a couple of turns of thread, then use your fingers to guide all the barbels back. Take the thread to the front and catch in and form a nice neat head. And break away the waste hackle stock. Next step is to put on our whip finish. I usually use 2 3-turn whip finishes. To be honest, one's probably enough, but sometimes belt and braces is a bit more reassuring. Trim away the waste thread, and that's the tying just about finished. Next step is to varnish the head. Here I'm using a UV resin, very thin resin. This gives a nice quick finish and a nice clean head. Carefully apply the resin to the head of the fly, trying not to get any resin on the feathers. Once you've got the resin applied, then set it with the UV torch. And next, trim the tail to length. Then a bit more of a brush out for the tail to fluff it out and make sure it's sitting nicely. And have a check of the body, make sure it's sitting nicely, and maybe we'll run over with some Velcro just to make sure the hackles are sitting nicely and the fly is robust. And that's it. The Pearl Chenille Clan Chief. Thanks again for watching.